Your metabolism is the sum of all the cellular reactions that you need to live. Reactions that require energy use a type of cellular energy called ATP. That means that the food you eat doesn't directly fuel your metabolism. Instead, food is used to create ATP, which directly fuels reactions. This is ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. It gets its name from the fact that it has a tail of 3 phosphate groups. 1, 2, 3. When a cell needs molecular energy, this is the molecule it uses to do work, such as send a neural impulse, make proteins, or create new cells. ATP has high potential energy because it's an unstable molecule. When molecules are unstable, it means that some of the bonds are fragile. In this molecule, the 3 phosphate groups would rather be split apart. They want to break away from each other. This is because each group has a negative charge, and like charges repel. So where's the energy in the molecule? In the most unstable part, the phosphate groups, specifically the bonds that connect the phosphate groups. If a cell needs to divide to create new cells, it's going to need a lot of ATP to do the work of division. And every time an ATP molecule is used, a phosphate group breaks off as fuel. ATP can take on 3 different forms, but in Bio 101 we'll use 2. ATP and ADP. ADP looks just like ATP, but it only has 2 phosphate groups. It's called adenosine diphosphate. ADP is formed when ATP is used in a reaction. A phosphate group breaks off, and a nucleotide with only 2 phosphate groups is left. ADP is more stable and has less potential energy than ATP since there are only 2 negative phosphate groups next to each other. So how do cells use ATP? Well, imagine a cell that needs to actively transport calcium ions into its cell. Because the gradient is unfavorable, the proteins need energy to pump calcium into the cell. In the first frame, calcium randomly bumps into an active transport protein. ATP, floating in the cytoplasm, slips into the binding site on the protein. In frame 2, ATP is engaged, and the ion is ready to be pumped in. In frame 3, a phosphate group is removed from ATP, and at the same time the ion is pumped through. You can see in frame 4 that what is left is ADP and a free phosphate. Because only a portion of the potential energy in ATP is transferred to the transport protein, there will also be heat that's given off. Cells are the ultimate recycling machines, and you can see this with the use of ATP. When ATP is used to do work, ADP and a free phosphate are produced. So ATP, energy is used, there's your free phosphate, and ADP that are left over. But those products are not disposed of. Instead, energy from the food we eat is used to force the phosphate back on to produce ATP. This cycle continues over and over again. All living things use ATP to meet their metabolic needs. This is yet another example of something that all living things have in common.